Hey, good afternoon. Welcome in here at PowerMizzou.com to our YouTube channel. A lot of demand from Missouri fans for basketball coverage this time of year. So we're starting up preview shows here of Missouri's bigger games. We'll do one this week talking Vandy, next week Kentucky, and then we'll have one before every postseason game Missouri plays. These are going to be brought to you by our friends at Cornerstone Family Medical Clinic. They've got locations, physical locations in Mexico and Fulton, Missouri. Look, if you're tired of waiting for a physician, you don't want to pay to go to urgent care, Cornerstone has a bunch of online options, a bunch of virtual options. They're going to guarantee you an appointment same day or next day. Again, you can see them in person at Fulton or Mexico, but they can cover you across the state. For more information, just go to cornerstonefmclinic.com. That address is going to be scrolling across the bottom of the screen for most of this show. Now, we are going to look, you don't want to listen to me preview a basketball game for 20 minutes. That's what I do every day. So we're going to bring in a guest. We're going to turn to Joey Dwyer, covers the Commodores for Vandy247.com. Joey, how's it going today, man?
Good. Thank you for having me. We're glad to be on the same network as you again. It's been a
Yeah.
while, but glad to be teaming up again.
Yeah, I was really happy you guys came over on January 1st. I know Drew King is looking forward to coming down to Nashville and sitting 8,000 feet above the floor and staring at Vanderbilt's banners that hang from the ceiling. So,
Yeah, I mean there'll be more than 10 people in the gym this year though, so that'll be
right.
a big step up versus last year's game.
Yeah, let's start there. I mean, what has the reception and the interest been from Vandy fans in Mark Byington's first year?
I mean, it's been night and day versus last year, and they've got good reason to have interest this year. This is a team that has obviously turned it around in a way that I don't think anybody really expected. We talked preseason about how they were a team that an NIT berth would be real progress for. Year one of a coaching tenure, and you got to bring in 11 transfers. You generally think, man, you'd be happy to win 5 or 6 SEC games. That would be a huge step forward relative to what they had done as a program. You just wanted to see some upward trajectory. But, I mean, this program is firmly in the mix for an NCAA tournament bid right now, and a lot of people think they've got it right now. I think Wednesday night against Texas A&M might have sealed the deal for him. Joe Lenardi said that it would essentially clinch a bid, and obviously he's not the committee, but he's got sources on the committee. He's a guy who follows it as closely as anybody, and you just generally think that it's turned positively in a lot of ways, and bigger than all, it's just the feeling. It feels like Vanderbilt basketball is important again. It feels like Vanderbilt basketball has a chance, and that's been missing for a little bit.
So you mentioned the win over A&M, and I kind of felt the same way. I tried to watch it. To be honest, I fell asleep because the last 2.5 minutes took an hour. But I watched most of it, saw the next morning that they won, and my first reaction was Vandy's in the tournament. So people have been asking me this week, look, is this bad for Missouri because Vandy's confident and playing well? Or is there a potential letdown here for Vandy because, like, hey, they've reached the goal, and maybe Saturday isn't quite as important as Saturday might have been 3 days ago?
Yeah, it's interesting. They had always, as a staff, thought the magic number was 8. From every indication I've heard, everybody I've talked to them it's been, man, we need to get 8 wins to get in the tournament. And I wonder if that's still kind of what they're telling the guys, even if that's not necessarily even the case anymore. I think that win is almost one, and you guys have experienced this covering teams on the bubble over the years. There's wins that sometimes mean more than just one win. That one was one of them, where it's a quad 1A win on the road. They hadn't had a huge road win on their resume to that point. That was really the one thing missing. So I think that might have put them over the edge, but I generally think they'll be prepared, and it's not really a team that's fluctuated their intensity, and I think that's been a real testament to what Mark Byington has done. Like, they've been ready to go every game, and sometimes they've worn down in second half, sometimes they've lost focus and intensity in second halves, but I've never looked at a game and it's like, man, they were not ready to play. They got ran off the floor in the first half. I would guess that Saturday they'll be ready to go, especially with the environment that's going to be at Memorial Gym. It's going to be a whiteout. Feels like this is the most advertised Vanderbilt basketball game, maybe not in a couple years, but maybe throughout the course of the season. I just feel like the intensity will still be there. And Gabe, it's an interesting point too. Vanderbilt heading into Saturday had played 9 teams in a row that were coming off a loss. I think Missouri is the first team that is not in that way. So that'll be interesting to see if there's any effect there in terms of the intensity of their opponent, which will not be pissed off on Saturday.
Right. Well, and it's, I mean, with Vandy, like, even if they need one more win, this is life in this league, right? There's not an automatic win left on the schedule. Like Arkansas comes there at home. You would think Vandy would win. At Georgia, I don't know. Georgia's weird. They like to play about 24 good minutes of basketball and then see if they can blow it all in 16. But the difference in Vandy on Wednesday night was, look, they've done this at home this year, right? They've been really good at home, beat Texas, beat Tennessee, beat Kentucky, beat Ole Miss. The difference was they did it somewhere else. But before Wednesday night, like, how big was the difference between road Vanderbilt and home Vanderbilt?
I think it had been overstated a little bit just because of the difference in competition. Like, you look at what they've done on the road. They played well against Tennessee, played well against Florida, and as well as anybody, if you play well against those teams, you still probably are going to lose. And there is something to it. They were 2-5 on the road. Their 2 wins were against unimpressive teams, LSU, Virginia Tech, who I think unimpressive might not be a strong enough word for what Virginia Tech has done this year. But I just look at that as something that maybe alters the committee's perspective of them, even if it wasn't entirely fair, just because they had never done it on the road like that. And I think the way they did it was more impressive than anything. Jason Edwards had 4 fouls, had the technical that could have sucked the life out of Vanderbilt. Devin McLaughlin and Jalen Carey, from the 12-minute mark on in the game, had 4 fouls each, and both had to sit for extended stretches. AJ Hoggard didn't score, and Vanderbilt still finds a way to win at Texas A&M. I wrote this morning that a win like that tells you that they can win an NCAA tournament play because everybody can do it. They have good enough depth to be able to do it, and that's a word that's been overstated by many of Vanderbilt coaching staff over the years, but it feels like Mark Byington actually has it. You got a guy like MJ Collins off the bench who is a guard that can start on some teams in the league, and it'd be more so the case in past years, but he can put it on the floor and get his own shot. He can defend, and he's their 7th man. So I thought that win said a lot about them, and they finally got some payoff for the efforts they've been putting in on the road recently.
Yeah, I mean, Edwards, look, he's the one everybody knows, right? 17 points a game. He's the best player on this team. But they've got, like you said, they go 7-8 deep with legit player. I mean, Tyler Nickel absolutely killed A&M. McLaughlin's been big at times. AJ Hoggard, a ton of experience. Tyler Tanner, really good as a freshman. Like, if I take Jason Edwards off the table and say, who's the key for this team going, not just Saturday, but going forward, who's your guy?
I think Jalen Carey is the guy that I've always kind of answered that question to. I think Tyler Nickel is a close second. Obviously, you saw on Wednesday, if Tyler Nickel hits 7 threes like he did, they're not going to lose to many people, right? They're not, no matter where they're playing or who they're playing. It's hard to lose when your best shooter hits 7 threes. But Carey, I think, is the X factor for this team just as a whole. He's maybe their most talented overall player, which is saying something considering some of the old guys they have. He's a 19-year-old sophomore, really physical, and he does a lot of things that nobody else on their roster can do. He's really, the whole package is a big man, but it's not quite there yet because he's 19 and because he's being thrust into a situation that 19-year-olds who transfer from mid-majors often are not. They don't have enough depth in the front court, so he's got to stay out of foul trouble, and I think that's the biggest thing. But when he scores 10-plus points, there's something like 12-2, and that's a huge difference. When they win, it's because Jalen Carey is doing Jalen Carey things. He's putting the ball on the floor. He's changing the energy of the game like he did against Tennessee. He's sometimes even making shots from the perimeter. He's making passes. When they're not going, though, it's because, or a good portion of that result is because Jalen Carey is either off the floor and unavailable because of foul trouble or because he looks like a 19-year-old.
When Vandy came here, and it was 2 months ago now, it's interesting the parallels between Missouri's football and basketball season. They played Vanderbilt early in the conference season in both, won relatively close games, and the next day Missouri fans were panicked. Well, we're not going to do anything because, like, Vandy sucks and we barely beat them. And Vandy actually turned out not to suck in either one, and those are actually pretty quality wins. But when they came here, Mark Byington's post game, he just said, look, when Caleb Grill and Samar Bates have nights like Caleb Grill and Samar Bates had, there's not much you can do. Like, they're going to beat almost everybody in the country. So, I'm curious. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to talk to Byington headed into this one about kind of what differences he sees or what concerns him about Missouri this time.
Yeah, we actually haven't. His availability this week got pushed up to Monday, but I think Missouri just is a weird matchup for Vanderbilt because Mark Mitchell is a guy that Vanderbilt doesn't have much of an answer for with Devin McGlockton
Mhm.
and Jalen Carey. They don't really have a four who's big enough to guard him either that can kind of switch on to him. So I think they are an odd matchup in that way. And Josh Gray, who I talked to for a Southeastern 16 piece, is certainly a guy that can give them some trouble too, just on the glass in terms of his intensity. The stats from him when I was picking up that article, by the way, were nuts. He scored like four times over 10 points in his career, which
Mhm.
just blows my mind. But I think they are a weird matchup for Vanderbilt, also because they've got so much size on the wing with Tamar Bates, and I think that eventually wears Vanderbilt down, and it has throughout the year. So I think it's going to be a game where the margin for error is small for Vanderbilt. It's got to control the tempo. It's got to make shots like it did on Wednesday, and it's got a chance that way. But I predicted in the thing I did with you guys for the site that Mizzou would win by 6, and I just kind of feel that's more of a result of the way Missouri's playing than the matchup even.
Mhm. Yeah. What is it about that gym? I mean, I know the floor is raised and it might change sight lines, and I know that players sit in different places, but I don't know if you've talked to many visiting teams or coaches or anything. What is it that's so weird about playing there for other teams?
I think it's just so different that teams just have no idea what to do when they get in there. It's almost weird because too like you said about the Missouri fans, you never think anything of Vanderbilt coming in there, and then you come in and it's like, wow, these guys can actually play, and we're in this weird setting. What's going on? And Bruce Pearl actually did a pretty good job articulating some of the challenges a few weeks ago, where he's talking about how he's on the south end of the court and they're defending on the north end, so it's hard for him to call out defensive commands because he really can't get to his guys. I think that's a thing, and Mark Byington has even had to adjust a little bit, I think, to coaching on the sideline there. I think more of the challenge than even playing Vanderbilt is just communicating with the staff because especially the assistants are completely on the other end of the court a lot of the time, and it's hard when you're bringing the ball up the court and the assistants aren't right next to you, they're way behind you. So that's, I think, the challenge of Memorial Gym. And Memorial Magic, I think, is an overstated term in a lot of ways, but it has shown up this year. You look at the way they beat Tennessee, they had that scoring drought late and Chris Young gets the block. You look at the way they beat Kentucky, some of the late game finishes they've had. There's just an extra level of confidence from Vanderbilt in that gym relative to elsewhere.
It's wild how much different this is than I think it was right around Valentine's Day last year when Missouri came down there. I know it was the ninth conference game of the season because, like, going into that one, I said, okay, if Missouri loses this one, they're 0-9, and there's like 0-18 is legitimately in the picture, right? And now both of these teams are headed toward the NCAA tournament. Missouri fans have, and I think rightfully so, like adjusted their expectations. Like they've been in the tournament for 2 or 3 weeks now, and now it's hey, top 4 seed, and we think we can make a run. Obviously, on one level, Vandy's happy with hey, we're going to be a tournament team. That's a wild success.
Mhm.
Do you think there is an adjustment in expectation or hope coming, or like what's good for this team the rest of the way? Is just getting there good enough?
Yeah, I think with all the context considered of the dumpster fire that Mark Byington inherited last year, to be frank, and having to get 11 transfers and their non-conference strength of schedule being a factor throughout a lot of the way, just getting in the tournament, especially in this league, I think is a real sign of progress. I don't think anybody's going to be upset with them if they lose in the first round of the tournament. I don't think anything that could happen in that first round would change how I view the season because I think it's a resounding success in a lot of ways. It surpassed my expectations already. And I think they've got to be rewarded with an NCAA tournament berth for it to be truly considered a success. But they're on track to do it. And one more win probably makes you feel a lot better about it. But it doesn't have to come on Saturday. It's not a must win game on Saturday against Mizzou. It's just a barometer to see can they compete with a team like that at home versus what they did on the road against them, which they pushed them, but I thought there was more on the table for them in that game. You remember Jason Edwards got back cut by Caleb Grill and then fouled him on the 3-point shot. Those are things that can't happen late in games. And a lot of the concern coming out of that game for me was can they close? And they've started to do that a little bit more. I want to see where they're at now versus where they were a few weeks back when they played them.
Kind of wrap up. You mentioned Southeastern 16. I know you do a lot of work with Chris and those guys. What's the number for what's the number of SEC teams you think is going to end up getting in this thing?
I don't know. I guess I haven't looked closely enough in the last day or two. I think Arkansas should be in if maybe they get one more. I think Georgia is probably in after they beat Florida. Vandy,
That's
I think.
crazy. Georgia's
Yeah,
in.
right. Vandy should be in, I think, as long as it's not complete disaster the rest of the way. Man, it's going to be a lot, and I
So
think people are going to be
we're looking at
surprised.
12 there, plus potentially Texas and Oklahoma, which somehow are still alive as well.
Yeah, Texas's computers are still really good, and I don't know that Oklahoma has a good enough case, but I think Texas could certainly get in too. That's 13. Man, it's nuts. And I don't think it's undeserved either. I think like all these teams have legitimate resumes, and it's not we're overcorrecting for a league we thought was tough. I think it's just these teams are all really good and they all deserve to be in.
Hey, look, we know SEC's always been a basketball league, man. It's that's the SEC's big thing.
It always has been, right?
Absolutely. All right, Joey, appreciate you, man. Everybody can follow Joey and his team's work over at Vandy247.com. They'll have plenty of stuff from the game on Saturday. I think that's tomorrow. I forget what day of the week it is.
Yeah, tomorrow. They all blend together this time of year.
Yep. All right. Appreciate you, man. We will talk to you and let us know if you need anything.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one. That is Joey Dwyer from Vandy 24/7. You can check them out. They do a great job. Reminder, especially as we do these preview shows, we get into the month of March on the 24/7 Sports Network. With your membership, you can read every message board on the network. So you want to see what Vandy fans are saying about facing Dennis Gates and his team, you can go check that out and see what they have to say. Same with Oklahoma next week, with Kentucky next week, going into the NCAA tournament, all that. Just kind of a little perk of being on this network. You guys can see what the opposing fans are saying. Want to remind you on the way out again, our preview shows throughout the rest of the season going to be brought to you by our friends at Cornerstone Family Medical Clinic. Unparalleled access to your provider on call 24/7 and guaranteed same or next day appointments. They can dispense and ship meds from their clinic for cheaper than what you can get with your insurance at the pharmacy. Hey, if you're in a situation where maybe your insurance, maybe you don't have insurance, maybe it's costing too much, high deductibles, whatever, check out Cornerstone Family Medicine at cornerstonefmclinic.com. They've got their prices there, anywhere from $22 to $55 a month, depending on your age and what kind of plan you're looking at. So I encourage you to check them out. They're going to be with us throughout the rest of the basketball season. And who knows how long that might last, guys. Get started tomorrow night in Nashville at 5 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. Drew King and I will be with you live after the game tomorrow night. Drew from Nashville, me here in Columbia. We'll talk to you then.